Toxins, gut biome, light exposure, and hormesis are just a few things that impact our aging process both negatively and positively. Let's face it, getting older isn't a process a lot of us go into with great enthusiasm. But if we have some levers that we can control that will help us slow down the biological clock, even though the birthdays keep coming, wouldn't you be interested? That is why I am excited to introduce to you my special guest on the Thin Thinking podcast this week, Dr. Jeremiah Jimerson. He is an expert in the process of aging and steps that we can take today to put us more in power of holding on to health and youthfulness. So please join me for a chance to throw some lucky pennies in the fountain of youth and come on in. Did you know that our struggle with weight doesn't start with the food on your plate or get fixed in the gym? 80% of our weight struggle is mental. That's right. The key to unlocking long-term weight release and management begins in your mind. Hi there, I'm Rita Black. I'm a clinical hypnotherapist, weight loss expert, best-selling author, and the creator of the Shift Weight Mastery process. And not only have I helped thousands of people over the past 20 years achieve long-term weight mastery, I am also a former weight struggler, carb addict, and binge eater. And after 2 decades of failed diets and fad weight loss programs, I lost 40 pounds with the help of hypnosis. Not only did I release all that weight, I have kept it off for 25 years. Enter the Thin Thinking podcast, where you too will learn how to remove the mental roadblocks that keep you struggling. I'll give you the thin thinking tools, skills, and insights to help you develop the mindset you need, not only to achieve your ideal weight, but to stay there long term and live your best life. Hello, and happy May Day. Are you gathering around the maypole? For those of you listening on the day we send this out, I was thinking about May Day. And I remember as a kid, there was a maypole tradition my mom used to speak about. And then when I lived in England, I heard about it as an old custom. So I decided to look it up on my favorite friend, ChatGPT, and share this with you. One of the most well-known traditions associated with May Day is the custom of maypole dancing, particularly in European countries like England, Germany, and Scandinavia. Maypole dancing involves weaving ribbons around a tall pole adorned with flowers and greenery. The flowers used to decorate the maypole symbolize the renewal of nature and the blossoming of flowers and plants during the spring season. Oh, nice. It's too bad that most of those flowers are now dead here in California by May 1st. Not all of them, but many of them. So if you don't have a maypole, or if you do, I'm excited to shift into spring and the idea of being a spring chicken and explore some things that we can do to manage the aging process with my special guest, Dr. Jeremiah Jimerson. Dr. Jeremiah Jimerson is a trailblazer in the field of longevity and anti-aging. His journey began with a deep commitment to health and wellness, and over the years, he has emerged as a leading figure in innovative health technologies and holistic wellness strategies. An early adopter of whole-body cryotherapy, Dr. Jimerson has demonstrated a keen insight into revolutionary health modalities, pioneering their use for enhanced health, well-being, and recovery. His innovative spirit didn't stop there. He also developed his own whole-body photobiomodulation bed, utilizing the power of light therapy to promote cellular health and rejuvenation. As the creator of the Younger You Blueprint, Dr. Jimerson has built a substantial online presence with nearly 1 million followers across social media. His platforms offer a comprehensive approach to health, integrating diet, lifestyle changes, and advanced wellness practices to combat aging and chronic inflammation, as well as promote vitality. Welcome, Dr. Jimerson. Well, hello, Jeremiah, and welcome to the Thin Thinking Podcast. We are excited to have you. I am excited to have you and talk about how to grow younger. I love that idea.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for having me.
It's um, it's really great. I want to hear all about what you have to say about aging and our health. But tell us first, I always like to hear about like how you personally got into longevity and anti-aging. Like what was the pull for you?
The pull for me was I hit rock bottom early on in my 20s. Yeah, I did all of the wrong things, throughout school. School was just high stress. Becoming a doctor, incredibly stressful. Eating terrible food back then. Drinking too much alcohol. A lot of wear and tear on my body. I sadly to say I was a pack a day cigarette smoker. So I mean, I really trounced my body.
Okay,
Been an
I get it. I
honor.
was a pack and a half, so I beat you out on that one. But I
Yeah,
love that you were studying medicine and smoking and drinking. That really
yeah,
that says a lot for our medical system right there.
yeah, yeah.
Let's start your
Anything
career
to
smoking and
stop
drinking.
stress. Exactly.
Yeah.
So by the time I graduated, I was developing, a joint autoimmune type issue. So my joints would start getting inflamed. I had IBS. I was starting to develop a brain fog. I was having a lot of symptoms and a lot of issues. And it was kind of the birth of my son that kind of started kind of like hit me in the face, and I'm like, oh my god, like this isn't just about me. This is about him and his kids, and I want to be around for all of that. And that's kind of where it started. I realized that I had to start kind of pulling myself out of that. And as I kind of went along, a lot of the traditional medical therapies, a lot of things that I was starting to do wasn't necessarily fixing it. So I had to continue to learn.
So was that so you in your medical school trajectory, you were not finding the answers for something, as basic as what you were needing?
No, no, not at all. I mean, I tried. I suffered a bit, and I tried. I probably spent several $100,000 in anything from therapies to tools and toys, and all that stuff felt good. It didn't necessarily fix it, though.
Interesting. So, well, let's dive into, I think what one of the things that we were talking about before I turned on record was like gut bacteria and gut health's role in our health and aging and longevity. I'm hearing this more and more, like gut microbiome is, a big word out in the zeitgeist. But anti-aging, like how are those two sort of paired together? It's like how does the quality of our microbiome impact our aging or longevity?
So we've got microbiomes all over the place. They're in our gut, in our skin, in our mouth, our lungs. We're absolutely just teeming in bacteria. But our gut, particularly, that's 80 to 90% of your immune system. And so that's your body's ability to fight off bacteria, viruses, and even cancers.
Right.
And they say that if your gut is inflamed, your brain's going to be inflamed. And so a lot of scientists they say that like neurodegenerative diseases, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, that stuff starts in the gut, or that's one of the starting places of it.
Interesting. Mm.
So it's pretty tremendous. And most of us, our diets are so filled with processed foods today. The gut bacteria can't really do a lot with a lot of those processed foods.
Mm. So they don't respond at all, or they are actually negatively impacted by processed foods.
They're negative impacted. You're
Mhm.
feeding a lot more of the bad guys. You're kind of starving off some of the good guys, and it's this whole
Mm.
kind of war that's being won and lost.
Wow. All of that going on in my gut as I'm talking to you here. It's amazing. It's a whole saga down there in my gut. So tell me, I have just a quick question, and maybe some of my listeners are curious about this, but so there's anti-aging and then there's longevity. How are the two? Are they different or are they same? Because one, for longevity to me means longer life. And I guess anti-aging means that life that I'm going to live is going to be a better quality life. Is that
Right,
kind
right.
of the idea?
That's exactly how I look at it. It's kind of like you're shooting for both of them, but there's some people that they live long, but they're very poor quality, right? When they get to that end of the finish line, it's not a pretty sight, right? And so I think that's where the anti-aging comes along, is
Mm,
trying to maintain that youthful vigor, and getting to really enjoy and have greater quality of those years. So absolutely.
right. So if you also mentioned mitochondria, and tell me what those are, because I hear them spoken about quite often, and how do they contribute to anti-aging?
The mitochondria, it's basically like the nuclear power plant of your cells. Like it's kind of
Mm,
like their battery. And so as we age, our batteries or those mitochondria just don't function as well. So, by the time you hit 70, they're pretty much operating at maybe 30% capacity. Um,
wow.
but everybody's a little bit different. We have biological aging and we have chronological aging. So everybody knows chronological aging. I'm 45. My biological age can be a little bit different. So my numbers, my years that I've been alive might be 45. My biological age is probably about 35. Right. So
Mm,
my cells look and operate and act more like a 35-year-old.
wow. How do you test for that? Like, how do you find that out?
There's different tests. It's called the Horvath clock that you can send out some blood samples and it'll give you an idea of your aging.
Wow.
Horvath.
I think I've heard of that before. That's fascinating. So it's primarily they test through blood and looking at the just different what's functioning well, what's not functioning well in your system
Yeah,
when they're
they
looking
look
at
at
that.
they look at things. They look at methylation.
Hmm. Hmm. And that methylation, I've heard of that as well. That's how your cells are processing the
in
stuff
in
that's
so many
coming out.
in so many
I'm
words. In
going to
so many
sound very
words.
dumb, huh?
I said in so many words that works.
Okay. You were also mentioning before turning on record. We had a very fascinating conversation before we turned on record. Yeah. But circadian rhythms, how do they factor into aging and that how overall health and well-being?
So circadian rhythms are a huge piece of the puzzle. I mean, you could be eating right, you could be exercising, but if you're not sleeping, and it's not just necessarily going to sleep, because you can drink a bunch of alcohol and sleep pretty hard, but you're missing out on some of that sleep quality. But every single cell on this planet is all kind of tied into circadian rhythms, or it's kind of like the rising and the setting of the sun. And it's so much a huge portion of our health that the 2017 Nobel Prize was all about
Mm,
circadian rhythms in human biology, and it controls everything from like gene expression to metabolism, hormone balance, digestion, sleep quality, your immune system. I mean, it's all controlled by circadian rhythms.
mm. And so how would you factor, like if somebody was working with you, how would you predict or know whether or not their circadian rhythms were like operating well or not operating well, or is it just that I'm not, like for instance, uh if I'm not getting quality sleep, how do you test for that, or how do you know from, speaking to somebody?
One of the first and easiest things that I ask people is do you wake up feeling like $1 million?
Well, that's a
That's
good
like,
question.
yeah, do you wake up and feel great? Like, are you ready to jump out of bed? Or sometimes we'll take a look at we'll do a hormone test on people, and so we're taking a look at a lot of times cortisol. So cortisol is your stress hormone. It's not always necessarily bad, but cortisol should be nice and high in the morning, and then it should slowly kind of taper on throughout the day. And cortisol eventually gets converted into cortisone. That's your body's anti-inflammatory. But first thing in the morning, that's what gets you up out of bed and it makes you feel like $1 million and ready to kind of conquer the world. And so we'll do some of these hormone tests and we'll take a look and we'll see their cortisol spike. Maybe doesn't doesn't start rising until like 12 o'clock. And I'll look at the test and I'll look at the patient. I'll say, "You're not a morning person, are you?" Like, "No, how did you know that?" I'm like, "You probably don't start feeling like yourself until about 12 o'clock." "Yeah, how did you know?" And you can see that little cortisol spike on their test right there.
Do you, so with that, that's fascinating. How, so if they were going to try to change that, would it be changing their sleep pattern? Would it be going to bed earlier? Would it be going, how do you change where your cortisol is spiking?
It typically comes down to light.
Oh, because you were
Light.
talking, oh, so light therapy, is
Yeah.
that what you're
Well,
talking about?
this is different wavelengths of light, right? So during the middle of the day, there's a lot of blue light in the sun.
Hmm.
And during first thing in the morning, like you imagine, you get up, you go outside, and you're looking at the sunrise. There's a lot more red and oranges, first thing in the morning. At
Hmm.
nighttime, there's a lot more reds and oranges. And so, blue light, if you're going to be walking around in the middle of the day, you shouldn't be producing a lot of melatonin. And so blue light basically turns off melatonin. Now, what's happening is in our modern day and age, we've got LEDs everywhere. We've got our LED light bulbs over us. We've got our cell phones, our computer screens, all that stuff. And those guys have a really, really high blue peak to it, like really skyrocketed. And it's not very natural. And you're not typically going to see something like that unless it's going to be like the middle of the day. So what happens is we're all sitting at home watching Netflix and on our cell phones, and we've got our lights and stuff like that, and we've got all of this blue light that's kind of going through these
Mm.
screens, and it's hitting our eyes and it's hitting our brain, and it's saying, "Yo, it's in the middle of the day. Don't make any melatonin."
Oh, I never knew that. That's so fascinating. So, is that why people wear those glasses that like block out the blue light? Oh, okay.
Absolutely,
Get that
absolutely.
now.
Yeah, yeah. That and just even dialing back the intensity of the light. At least and I've done experiments where I completely restricted any artificial light at night and stuff like that. And it's a little intense. I don't think you have to go too crazy, but at least an hour and a half, 2 hours before you go to bed. Just that's when you really want to start putting the screens down, when you want to kind of start like kind of turning your lights down and just kind of making it kind of more like a cave.
Okay. So Netflix off an hour at least before you go to bed.
At least,
And
yeah.
not scrolling on your phone before you go to bed. None of that stuff.
Exactly. Exactly.
Okay. Got it. Okay.
And then trying to get
Um,
that blue light exposure first thing in the morning. Go outside. I tell every single one of my clients, that should be one of your highest priorities. Go outside very first thing in the morning and just get some light exposure in your eyes.
and sorry, why is that? That's just to get that blue light going in your
So,
eyes?
so it's that morning light exposure starts kind of increasing your cortisol.
Got it.
So
Okay.
that's
Okay,
that
good.
starts it's almost kind of like a big orchestra, or kind of like a song. And so this kind of starts getting the song in place, so that it sounds a little bit more balanced. So it sounds like a beautiful song, as opposed to, you can imagine just a
A
poorly
screechy
performing orchestra. Yeah.
So, and is it important that you physically go outside, or can you look through a window at the light, or is there something about like looking at it with your bare eye through no glass, no nothing?
There is unfortunately something about, you don't necessarily want to get it through the window. It would take about 70 to 80 times the amount of exposure, um, which means that you probably wouldn't get it if you're trying to go through a window. So you actually want to go outside, because the window is filtering some of the wavelengths.
Wow, that is so fascinating. I was wondering why, because I've heard of that, like go outside, look at the like obviously not stare directly into the sun, but
Exactly.
just get some light. That is so interesting. Okay. I'm learning so much. Thank you. Um, so let's talk about inflammation, because you hear like inflammation is sort of the root of all diseases, so to speak. I mean, how do you see that playing a role in anti-aging? I
Um,
mean, is it just disease or is it other factors as well?
it's kind of everything, all of these things you'll kind of notice kind of blend together, so like, poor gut health or, poor circadian rhythms, all that stuff, poor diet, all leads to chronic inflammation. And it's not that inflammation's bad. Like, if you stub your toe or, you hurt yourself, you want that inflammation to come there. That's basically what's starting the healing process. The issue comes is that when we start getting chronic inflammation for periods of time, it's kind of like fire across all of your cells, and so it actually accelerates the aging. It's almost kind of like
Mm.
getting repeated sunburns. You keep getting burns and burns and burns, and your cells keep dividing, and your cells can only divide so many times, and then you start hitting mutations. That's when you start hitting cancers. So the same thing happens with
Oh.
all the cells across the body. They keep getting that fire, they keep getting that chronic inflammation, and that causes them to divide. You can only do that so many times before you start hitting those mutations.
Okay, that makes sense. And I understand that now. That's I mean, I understand it. I understood about inflammation, but I didn't understand. I had just heard about that our cells will only regenerate so many times, and that
Yeah,
is part of the aging process. And I know that they're working on that. They're actually doing studies and trying to get cells to do it more or to like with stem cell
yeah.
research and trying to regenerate. But I didn't understand that about if you get to a certain point of regeneration or what you're talking about, like s- rebooting themselves, basically, they'll only do that so many times before they start to mutate. And that's
Right.
the root of cancer for a lot of things,
Yeah, yeah.
people.
They say
Okay.
chronic inflammation, is causes seven of the top 10. Or I'm sorry, eight of the top 10 killers of mankind.
Hmm. Okay. You guys heard it here. What is the so when people are coming to you to, upgrade their lifestyle because you're in order to impact their aging, what are some common misconceptions that you see people have about aging?
A lot of things with aging is, people are always just, they say it's all about my genes. They're like, if grandma had, breast cancer, that means that I'm going to have breast cancer. And I always tell them that you're not married to your genetics.
Mhm.
So genetics or your genes, they basically load the gun, but it's your diet and your lifestyle and even your mindset that pull the trigger.
Mm.
So it's we might have the genetic predisposition for, let's say, breast cancer, but then maybe you're hard on your liver, and you drink a bunch and you eat some processed foods, and that puts pressure on your liver. You're going to have a harder time detoxifying your estrogens, and it's this huge web.
Right. Oh, okay. So people, so the biggest misconception is they think that it's already the cast is already
Ex-
there. They're
ex-
not, but
exactly,
they
exactly.
can through diet, through exercise, through lifestyle, they can
Yeah,
override those negative factors
yeah.
and
Getting Yeah, the circadian rhythms, the gut health, like all of that stuff kind of ties together.
hmm, interesting. Um, what would be some ways to combat like inflammation? What would, from your standpoint, how if somebody wanted to start to work on lessening their inflammation, what would you recommend?
I mean, I'd say the easiest thing is just really start dialing back on the processed foods. It's
Mm.
one of your easiest things. I mean, for me, one of my biggest like whoa in terms of like inflammation, one of the things that like really hit me hard was, I tried everything. I bought a $20,000 laser. I bought $100,000 whole body cryotherapy system to try to get myself out of pain. Initially in the beginning, cutting gluten out was one of the first like wow, and it was a hard thing to kind of come to terms with. Nobody wants to kind of get rid of gluten. It was in pretty much all of my absolute most favorite foods. And in the beginning when I had heard about it, I kind of went after it a little half-assed. I would cut it out during the weekdays, but then I would have all my favorite stuff on the weekends, and didn't really see any difference in terms of like my joint pain. And over a period of time, I came across this researcher, and this researcher was talking about gluten intolerance, and he was saying if you're intolerant, it's not necessarily like celiac, but if you're intolerant to gluten, just the amount found in a communion wafer is enough to cause an inflammatory reaction for 9 to 12 weeks afterwards. And I was like, get out of Dodge! Like I am shooting myself in the foot like every single time here. And that's kind of what led me to kind of do a Hail Mary and cut it out and just see what happened.
Right. No more communion wafers for you.
Yeah.
Cut that out. But yeah, no, I can totally, I know when I eat gluten, and I don't think I'm intolerant, but I just feel so much better. I can tell in my joints. And would you say the same is true for sugar? Like, I mean, maybe different because obviously gluten has a different impact on the body than sugar does.
Oh
But
yeah.
would you say, like, when you say processed foods, because there are a lot of people perhaps in this audience that are eating processed foods that are quote unquote healthy. You know what I mean? Like we see it as like a lot of vegetarian products, right? Like that are, processed because they want to seem like meat, but they're not. There's a lot of processing going on. So is
Yeah.
it processing in general, or is it processed foods that have the trans fats, have the sugar, have, you know,
It's
lots of gluten?
I'd say that processing in general, so even like your organic, healthier, processed foods or whatever, they're still garbage for you. They might be lesser garbage. They might not have, quite as much of the artificial dyes or pesticides, in it, but it's still processed. A lot of them are still have like, at our, local Whole Foods and Earth Fare, here, it's an entire supermarket devoted to, like health foods. And you take a look, and there's often canola oil in them, or there's
Mm.
inflammatory seed oils, or there's still junk like, guar gum and some of these things that, just disrupt your gut bacteria.
Okay. So things like what are some disruptors that you would say if we were looking at labels and wanting to avoid the things that would be disruptive to our gut health? What would be
I'd say
some
that
of the bigger things that we would
honestly,
avoid?
the biggest stuff that like if I'm looking at more natural foods and stuff like that, the big things that I'm typically looking at is aside from gluten, and it's not that I never eat gluten, I really minimize it, but the biggest thing would be seed oils. I really find canola oil, stuff that's loaded with extra sugars in it and stuff like that. Like a lot of times that's what we also see with some of the healthier processed foods, is that they're still adding sugar as well. So I'd say sugar and your inflammatory oils, like any type of like seed oil, vegetable oils, stuff like that, cottonseed oil.
Right. Okay. Gotcha. It's primarily the seed oil. So, and that
Yeah.
would be canola, cottonseed. Um, what are some other ones? So, like
Soy.
even soy oil. Okay. Well, that's very, very helpful because I think yeah, my husband, we were, trying to get meat out of our diet, but not all meat, but just cut back. And he went to this special vegetarian store in LA, which is great. Like there were a lot of really interesting things there, and I mean, it's amazing what they're doing as far as like vegan cheeses that are really. But you do look at the labels, and you're like, wow, there are a lot of ingredients here, and
Yeah.
some of them are fine, but some of them are like I don't even know what that ingredient is, so you wonder, is this really a healthier alternative? I mean,
Yeah.
obviously we don't want as many animal products in our diet either because that's not I mean, it's just like everybody's got their own world that they live in and choices that they make. um but it is interesting to look at those lists of what is in there and go, huh, that's
Yeah.
interesting. I wonder how good that is for me. um So when you're working with people, are you looking at, if somebody was coming to you for, or I know you work in groups with people and online, um, do you start with testing first, or do you start with, looking at diet? Are you looking at exercise? Um,
You
are
know,
you looking at the whole person?
we did the whole functional medicine testing stuff for a while, for a couple of years. And so functional medicine is typically, like somebody's going to come in, they're going to pay like, $3,000 to $5,000 up front, to work with somebody for about 6 months, and you're typically running like $1,000 in lab tests, after that typically aren't going to be covered by your insurance. So we're taking
Right,
a look at your gut microbiome, we're looking at those hormones, all of those other things. So we did this stuff, and I found myself kind of giving people tons of supplements. It's like another thousands of dollars of supplements, and it just felt like the traditional medical model. And so what I realized was that everybody needed the same foundational things to start with. They needed to change up their diet, get rid of a lot of the inflammatory foods. They needed to start adding in things like intermittent fasting, stress control. They needed to change up their lighting. Pretty much all of these things. And foundationally, everybody needed this stuff, regardless of the testing, regardless of all the different supplements. So we decided to bag all of the supplements. We decided to bag all of the testing and start running people through this kind of group program where we kind of take them through just diet and lifestyle. And
right.
it's amazing. I mean, we have people that have gotten off their immunosuppressants. I mean,
Wow.
yeah, without adding anything.
That's I know functional medicine can be very costly, and it is very prohibitive for people who don't have a lot of money. So it's great to hear that you're like looking at basics. Um, there was something we didn't talk about that I am fascinated in that you mentioned here, is hormesis, stressing your body out. And intermittent fasting does a bit of that, right? Like when you're
Right.
fasting, that's putting your body into a stress mode. And I know a lot of people in our audience are intermittent fasters or interested in intermittent fasting. But I'm assuming that's not the only way that you can create hormesis in the body. Like, why is hormesis good? First, let's start with that, and then you can talk about fasting or exercising or
It all, to like really oversimplify like health, it comes down to something called like allostatic load. And it's just that there has to be balance. And
okay,
it comes down to a lot in terms of like balance of stressors. So hormesis is a mild stressor that basically kind of unlocks your body's physiology, or its pharmaceutical, its own pharmaceutical clinic, and it kind of lets a lot of these chemicals kind of go. And all of these are anti-inflammatory, and they help your immune system. So like think of just even exercise. Exercise is a hormetic stress. So it's a mild stress, and if you don't do enough of it, you're not going to see any benefit. And if you do the right amount, you're going to see some amazing benefits. And then if you do too much, it's going to go the other way. You're going to see some pretty bad benefits, or
interesting.
no negative benefits.
So, like too much exercise or too intensive exercise becomes toxic, whereas like
Right.
just the right amount is going to be
Yeah.
very beneficial. But if you're
Or
just kind of like not doing so much, it's not
yeah.
going to really engage your body.
Yeah, or like light exposure. If you
Mhm.
get even UVB light. If you get no UVB, you're not going to get any benefit. If you get the perfect amount of UVB, you're going to produce more vitamin D. Our skin is actually a huge endocrine organ, so we get the right amount of UVB. It actually helps our hormones. If we get too much
Mm,
UVB, now we're going to get our sunburn, and now we're going to start increasing our risk for cancer, um,
yeah.
or or
Yeah, gosh.
heat stress. That's another huge one. So getting into a sauna, or cold plunges, and kind of getting adapted to the cold. All of those things are just mild stressors. Holding your breath, um, free divers, all of those mild stresses that, again, if you don't breathe at all, things are gonna go south. If you breathe a certain amount, you're gonna get a lot of really good benefits. If you breathe too much, now you actually go the opposite way, and you don't absorb oxygen the same.
Interesting. So, we gotta find the balance in everything, right?
Always.
What do you see with fasting? Does fasting then for longer spans of time then increase, like, or just keep hormesis going, and so that becomes beneficial, or is that the same? There's like a balance where you can create too much stress from fasting for too long?
You can definitely push intermittent fasting too long. So I've been intermittent fasting. I intermittent fasted probably for about 16 years, way before it had gotten popular, and I thought it was amazing. I was like, oh my gosh, like I had always wanted to see, like, six pack abs, and tried all this stuff, and then I started intermittent fasting, and it was in a couple of weeks. I'm like, this is amazing. And so I did that for, maybe about 14 years. And then I started kind of playing around with some 24-hour fasting. So, like, maybe once a week on top of my 16-hour fast, I would do like a 24-hour fast. And
Mhm.
that was hard. I felt like I hit the wall a little bit with that. And due to circumstances, I ended up doing twice a week, just for out of convenience, two 24-hour fasts. And I was good. I was lean. I was, amped up on coffee, but I started noticing that it started interfering with my sleep. And so,
Mm,
again, we it has to be that balance. We start kind of getting too much of a good thing. You're looking at this like, oh wow, if this is good, if I really do it, that's going to be even better. And
right,
that is always that's always what bites me in the butt. But again, it has to be, everything always comes down to balance.
right. Got it. Yeah, I mean, I think our brain just, our dopamine center just pushes, like, if we get something going that feels good, we just want more. "Oh,
Yeah,
well, then I need more of that, and then I
yeah.
need more of that," no matter what the thing is, so very interesting. Well, this has been so if somebody was gonna take step 1, I always ask people, like, if they were just gonna take the first step towards, feeling better, looking better, aging better, or aging backwards, uh, what would be that first step?
The very first step, honestly, I'm going to say, just focus on your easy stuff, low hanging fruit. I would focus on better sleep,
Mm,
eating better
mm,
blood sugar, just
mhm.
little things like that. And it's always, we're always looking for the most, sexiest, thing, these days. But honestly, kind of going back to a lot of the basics that you just don't think of are typically the most powerful.
Right. When you say blood sugar, you mean keeping your blood sugar balanced throughout the day, or making your getting your blood sugar in a good place if it's all over the place?
Just keeping it balanced, throughout the day.
Yeah.
We want to be like we want to be like a hybrid car. We want to be able to get into ketosis, so that's the absence of sugars and carbohydrates, and we want to be able to kind of you know basically burn our own body fat for fuel. We want to be able to burn glucose. We want to be able to fast. We want to be able to, any one of those scenarios, we want to be able to be strong. So, you want to be metabolically flexible is typically what they refer to it as.
Mm. And that looks like using fasting as a tool, using blood sugar regulation as a tool, all of those
Yeah,
things.
yeah. It's same thing. Like I was saying, in terms of like too much of a good thing. Like even ketosis, I tried ketosis for a couple of years, and so as you avoid carbohydrates and as you avoid sugars completely, then you're going to see still a little bit more insulin resistance. It's almost like your body kind of has a harder time kind of processing sugar. So again, it always has to be that balance.
Right. Yeah. I feel like if people get, especially people when they have a history of struggling with weight, really get into like that I'm doing it right and I'm doing it wrong. And so if you're in ketosis, great. But then if you get out, then it's like it has that boomerang
Yeah,
effect,
yeah.
right? So better to be sort of mindful, balanced, and find what feels right for you at the time, because you can be, if your blood sugar is all over the place, right, if it's inflexible and you have maybe metabolic syndrome, then but you can heal that, but then you're going to have more sensitivity towards sugar and carbs, right? The more healed you become or more balanced you become, you become also more sensitive. Is that right?
Sensitive, yeah, like you'll be able to, a better way to look at it would be you'll be able to tolerate it more, right? The more
Right.
sensitive you can, the more sensitive you can kind of get your insulin. You can eat an entire cake all in one sitting, and you're not going to gain like 10 pounds because it was just that one kind of like high blood sugar event. Or hopefully you're doing great things like you eat an entire cake at one sitting, and then you go for a long walk afterwards, which will mitigate a lot of that blood sugar spike.
Right.
Or make sure you're making sure that you're getting appropriate sleep around that, because again, poor sleep is also going to cause insulin resistance.
Right. Interesting. Well, this has been fantastic. Thank you. You're incredibly knowledgeable. How do we I'm going to definitely put all of your information in the show notes, but tell us about you're going to offer our wonderful Thin Thinking audience a 7-day. Tell us about your 7-day um, event, or not event, but tell us about the 7-day. I don't know what to call it, but tell me about the 7-day thing
I
that we're going
I
to
have
offer
a
people.
I have a free 7-day younger you blueprint class for you guys, and it should be on my bio. I'll give you guys the link for below. But it's a free 7-day class, and we kind of get a bit deeper into all of these topics. And then I was also telling Rita I'll put a code in there for you as well. I have a cravings class, and it kind of gets down into the physiology and some of the mindset of why people have a lot of food cravings. So I'll leave that there for you guys as well. That's a really good
Oh,
class.
fantastic. I think everybody would love that. All right. Well, thank you so much, Jeremiah, for coming on the Thin Thinking podcast and sharing your knowledge. And this has been really helpful. And we will look forward to having you back sometime soon. But good luck with everything and good luck with your health.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Okay, terrific. Thank you so much.
All right. Bye now.
Thank you, Dr. Jimerson. And if you would like to connect with Dr. Jimerson or learn more about how he helps people age more gracefully, please check out all the details in the show notes. Have a great week, and remember that the key, and probably the only key to unlocking the door of the weight struggle, is inside you. So keep listening and find it, and I will be here with you next week. Do you want to dive deeper into the mindset of long-term weight release? Head on over to www.shiftweightmastery.com. That's www.shiftweightmastery.com, where you'll find numerous tools and resources to help you unlock your mind for permanent weight release, tips, strategies, and more. And be sure to check the show notes to learn more about my book, From Fat to Thin Thinking: Unlock Your Mind for Permanent Weight Loss.